The envelope was thin, almost weightless, but when Elena Vargas held it in her hands, standing in the small kitchen of their Toronto apartment, it felt like holding a grenade. The paper was official, government watermark, bilingual, English on one side, French on the other. She read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. The number was printed in bold black ink at the bottom of the second page. $87,412, Canadian, due within 90 days, for a debt incurred in her maiden name, in a country she had not seen in 11 years, by people she had never met, her grandparents, both dead for over 2 decades. Eleanor set the letter on the kitchen counter. The morning sun was coming through the window, cutting across the linoleum floor in a bright rectangle. Outside, she could hear her daughter Rosa laughing, playing with the neighbor's dog in the small courtyard behind the building. That sound, that simple, ordinary sound of a child laughing without fear, that was what they had come here for. That was what they had risked everything for. She picked up the letter again. The words did not change. Her husband, Miguel, would be home in 3 hours. She needed to think. She needed to understand, but the only thing she understood was the number, $87,412, more than they made in 2 years, more than they had saved in a lifetime. Elena Vargas was 41 years old. She had survived a dictatorship, a civil war, 2 border crossings, and 3 years in a refugee camp. She had rebuilt her life from nothing, twice. She had learned a new language, worked 3 jobs, saved every dollar, and finally found peace. And now this. She folded the letter carefully, the way you fold something you wish would disappear if you just made it small enough. She put it in the drawer next to the stove, under the bills, under the receipts, under the children's school papers. She closed the drawer, then she stood there, her hand still on the handle, staring at nothing. Outside, Rosa was still laughing. The Vargas family had arrived in Toronto in February of 1984. Miguel, Elena, and their 2 children, Rosa and Daniel. Daniel was 9, Rosa was 6. They came with 2 suitcases, $800, and a stack of refugee documents stamped by 3 different governments. Miguel had been a high school teacher in their country. Elena had worked in a pharmacy. In Toronto, Miguel cleaned offices at night. Elena worked the morning shift at a hospital laundry facility. On weekends, she cleaned houses in the suburbs. They did not complain. Complaining was a luxury. Their apartment was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Dundas Street West. 1 bedroom, which the children shared, a fold-out couch in the living room for Miguel and Elena, a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand, a bathroom with tiles that were cracked but clean. The rent was $650 a month. They paid it on time, every time. They had never missed a payment, not once. Miguel left for work at 9 in the evening. He took 2 buses to reach the office tower downtown, where he vacuumed carpets, emptied trash bins, and wiped down desks that belonged to people who made more in a week than he made in a year. He came home at 5:30 in the morning. He slept until noon. Then he woke up and helped Daniel with his homework. Math, mostly. Daniel struggled with math. Miguel was patient. He had always been patient. Elena woke at 5 in the morning. She took the streetcar to the hospital. She worked until 1 in the afternoon. She came home, cooked lunch, helped Rosa practice reading, and then, 3 days a week, she took another bus to the houses she cleaned. She scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, and dusted furniture in homes with more rooms than their entire apartment building. She came home at 8. She cooked dinner. She made sure the children did their homework. She folded the laundry. She prepared lunches for the next day. She fell asleep sometimes, sitting at the kitchen table, but they were safe. That was what mattered. Rosa could laugh without flinching at the sound of trucks. Daniel could go to school without soldiers checking his bag. Miguel could walk down the street without wondering if he would be stopped, questioned, disappeared. Safety was not free. It cost $650 a month, plus groceries, plus utilities, plus everything else. But it was worth it. Every single dollar was worth it. On Sundays, they went to the small church on College Street. They sat in the back row. They prayed in Spanish. They thanked God for small mercies, a good week at work, a report card with decent grades, a day without bad news. Elena kept a small notebook in her purse. Every week she wrote down one thing she was grateful for. The entries were simple. Rosa smiled today. Daniel made a friend. Miguel did not cough as much. The rent is paid. We are still here. They had been here for 11 years, 11 years of building something from nothing, 11 years of learning to sleep without nightmares, 11 years of teaching their children that the world could be kind, that hard work mattered, that tomorrow could be better than today, 11 years of believing they had left the war behind. And then the letter came. Elena did not tell Miguel about the letter that first night. She waited until the weekend, Saturday morning. The children were at a birthday party 2 buildings over. The apartment was quiet. Miguel was drinking coffee at the small kitchen table. The same table where they ate every meal, where the children did their homework, where they paid their bills. Elena put the letter in front of him. She did not say anything. She just watched his face. Miguel read it slowly. His lips moved slightly as he translated the legal language in his head, English to Spanish, official words to real meaning. When he finished, he set the letter down very carefully. He looked at Elena. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he picked up the letter again and read it a second time, as if maybe he had misunderstood, as if maybe the number would change. It did not change. Miguel asked the first question everyone asks when something impossible happens. He asked, "How?" Elena shook her head. She did not know. The letter had an address at the bottom, a government office, Department of International Revenue Recovery, a phone number. Office hours Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Miguel said they would call on Monday. Elena nodded. They sat at the table in silence. The coffee went cold. On Monday, Miguel called during his lunch break. He used the payphone outside the office building where he worked. He had written down a list of questions on a piece of paper. He held the paper in one hand and the phone in the other. A woman answered. Her voice was polite, professional. She asked for his file number. Miguel read the number from the letter. There was a pause, the sound of keys being typed. Then the woman confirmed the amount, $87,412. She explained that this was a debt incurred by Elena's grandparents in 1952, a public infrastructure loan issued by the national government. Repayment was guaranteed by family guarantorship, a legal provision common at the time. The debt had been transferred to the Canadian government through an international treaty signed in 1979. The treaty allowed for the recovery of outstanding debts from citizens who had emigrated. The debt, with interest compounded annually at 8.5%, was now due. Miguel asked why they had not been notified earlier. The woman said they had been. A letter was sent to their address of record in 1989. Miguel said they had never received it. They had moved 3 times since arriving in Canada. The woman said that was unfortunate. But failure to respond to official correspondence did not invalidate the debt. Miguel asked what would happen if they could not pay. The woman said that depended on several factors, but generally, failure to pay could result in wage garnishment, property seizure, or deportation proceedings. Deportation was rare, she added, but it was within the legal framework if the debt was classified as fraudulent evasion. Miguel thanked her. He hung up. He stood at the payphone for a long time. A man in a suit walked past and gave him a strange look. Miguel realized he was still holding the piece of paper with his questions. He had only asked 3 of them. The rest did not matter anymore. That night, Miguel and Elena sat at the kitchen table again. The children were asleep. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of traffic on Dundas Street and the hum of the refrigerator. Miguel explained everything the woman had said. Elena listened. When he finished, she asked the question that mattered most. She asked if they could lose the children. Miguel said he did not know. Deportation could mean family separation if the children were born in Canada. But both Daniel and Rosa had been born before they arrived. They were not citizens, not yet. Their applications were still pending. If the family was deported, the children would go with them, back to a country they barely remembered. Back to a place where Miguel and Elena were still on lists, political lists, dangerous lists, lists that did not expire, just because you left. Going back was not an option. It was a death sentence. Maybe not immediate, maybe not obvious, but certain. Elena asked how this was possible. How could they be responsible for a debt from 73 years ago? Miguel did not have an answer. He had looked up the treaty at the library. It was real, signed by 47 countries, designed to recover debts left behind by emigrants during and after the Second World War. The logic was simple. Nations had borrowed money to rebuild. Citizens who benefited from that rebuilding had a responsibility to repay, even if they left. It did not matter that Elena's grandparents had died in 1971. It did not matter that Elena had been 8 years old when they died. It did not matter that she had never signed anything, never agreed to anything, never even knew the debt existed. The law said she was responsible. The law was clear. The history of this system was long and ugly. After the Second World War, many countries in Europe and Latin America took massive loans from international bodies, the Marshall Plan, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, loans to rebuild infrastructure, to stabilize economies, to prevent the spread of communism. The loans came with terms. One of those terms was family guarantorship. It was common practice. If a citizen benefited from public spending, their family line was tied to the repayment. The idea was to prevent default by creating multi-generational accountability. In theory, it made sense to the bankers and politicians who designed it. In practice, it created a system where debts could follow families across decades and continents. The system relied on something most people did not understand: compounding interest. A small loan taken in 1952 became a massive debt by 1995. A debt of $5,000 could balloon to $87,000, with 43 years of interest at 8.5%. The math was simple. The consequences were devastating. Most people never knew. The letters went to old addresses. The notices were filed in languages people did not speak anymore. The debts sat in databases, accruing interest, waiting, and then, sometimes, the system caught up. A name appeared in a new immigration file. A social insurance number matched an old record. A computer system, upgraded in the late 80s, cross-referenced millions of names across international databases. And suddenly, a letter arrived. Thin, almost weightless, but heavy enough to destroy a life. Between 1979 and 1995, over 14,000 families in Canada received letters like the one Elena Vargas received. Most paid. They borrowed from family, took second mortgages, liquidated retirement savings. Some declared bankruptcy. A few disappeared, moved again, changed their names, tried to vanish into the cracks of the system. A handful fought. They hired lawyers, filed appeals, challenged the treaties in court. Almost all of them lost. The law was the law. The debt was the debt. Elena and Miguel did not have money for a lawyer. They did not have money for anything except survival. Their savings account had $4,200. It had taken them 11 years to save that much. It was supposed to be for emergencies. For a down payment on a small house someday, for the children's education. It was supposed to be hope in the form of numbers. Now it was nothing, less than 5% of what they owed. Miguel went to the bank. He asked about a loan. The bank officer was polite. She looked at their income. She looked at their expenses. She looked at the debt notice. She said she was sorry, but they did not qualify. The debt-to-income ratio was too high. The risk was too great. She suggested they contact a credit counselor. Miguel thanked her and left. Elena went to her supervisor at the hospital. She asked if there were any extra shifts available. Her supervisor said there were not. Budget cuts. They were actually reducing hours for part-time staff. Elena nodded. She did not cry. Not there, not in front of her supervisor. She waited until she was on the streetcar going home. She sat in the back, staring out the window, and let the tears come silently. No one noticed. People in cities are good at not noticing. The 90-day deadline approached like a storm. Slow at first, then all at once. Miguel stopped sleeping. He lay on the fold-out couch, staring at the ceiling, doing math in his head. Math that never worked. No matter how he calculated, there was no solution. Elena started getting headaches, sharp ones behind her eyes. She took aspirin. It did not help. The pain was not from her head. It was from everywhere else. They did not tell the children. Rosa and Daniel knew something was wrong. Children always know. But they did not ask. They had learned, in another country, in another time, not to ask when adults were worried. Worry meant danger. Silence meant survival. Some lessons are hard to unlearn. 2 weeks before the deadline, Miguel made a decision. He told Elena they were going to fight. Not in court. Not with lawyers they could not afford. They were going to fight with the only weapon they had. Information, exposure, shame. Miguel had been a teacher. He knew how to research. He knew how to organize. He knew how to tell a story that people could not ignore. If the system relied on silence, on people paying quietly, on families suffering alone, then the solution was simple. Make noise. Miguel went to the library. He spent hours in the reference section, going through newspaper archives. He found other stories, other families. Not many. Most people did not talk about this kind of shame. But some had. A family in Montreal, a man in Vancouver, a woman in Halifax. Miguel wrote down their names. He found phone numbers. Some were disconnected. Some were wrong. But 3 of them answered. Miguel introduced himself. He explained what was happening. He asked if they would share their stories. 2 said yes. 1 said no, too afraid, too tired, too broken. Elena contacted a journalist, a young woman who wrote for a community newspaper. She had done a piece about refugee families 2 years earlier. Elena remembered it because the article had been kind. It had not treated them like victims or statistics. It had treated them like people. Elena called the newspaper. She left a message. The journalist called back the next day. They met at a coffee shop on Bloor Street. Elena told her everything. The journalist listened. She took notes. She asked if Elena was sure she wanted this story public. Elena said yes. She said she was tired of being afraid. She said shame only worked if you accepted it. The article ran 3 weeks later. Front page of the community section. The headline was simple. Families haunted by debts they never made. It told Elena's story. It told the Montreal family's story. It told the Vancouver man's story. It explained the treaty, the system, the compounding interest. It included a response from the Department of International Revenue Recovery. A spokesperson said the debts were legal and enforceable. The law was clear. No further comment. But the article did something the government had not expected. It made people angry. Letters started coming into the newspaper, from readers who had never heard of this system, from lawyers who thought it was unconscionable, from a law professor at the University of Toronto who said the treaty likely violated contemporary human rights law. The story was picked up by a larger paper, then by a radio station, then by a television news program. Within 2 months, there were protests, small ones, mostly organized by refugee advocacy groups, but they were public, they were visible. A member of parliament, a woman who had herself come to Canada as a refugee 30 years earlier, raised the issue in the House of Commons. She called the system barbaric. She introduced a private member's bill to suspend the treaty. The bill did not pass, but it forced a debate. And debates create records. Records create accountability. Accountability creates change. Slowly. Too slowly for most. But it happens. Elena and Miguel did not pay the debt. They could not. The government sent more letters. They ignored them. A collection agency called. Miguel told them to put everything in writing. The calls stopped. There was talk of legal action, but legal action costs money too. And by now, the case was public. Taking a refugee family to court over a 73-year-old debt in front of cameras with journalists watching was not good optics. The government quietly put the case on hold, pending review, pending policy consideration, pending, which in bureaucratic language often means forever. 3 years later, the treaty was amended. Not abolished, but amended. Debts older than 50 years were forgiven. Compounding interest was capped. Family guarantorship was limited to direct signatories. It was not perfect. It did not help everyone, but it helped some. It helped Elena and Miguel. Their debt was erased. Officially, legally, gone. But the damage was not erased. Miguel developed high blood pressure. Elena's headaches never fully went away. Daniel, who was 20 by then, had watched his parents fight something invisible and won, but he had also seen what it cost. He became a lawyer, immigration law. Rosa, who was 17, became an activist. She organized, she spoke, she fought. She never forgot the sound of her mother crying on the streetcar, the sound she was not supposed to hear. Elena kept the original letter. She put it in a frame, not as a trophy, as a reminder. She hung it in the hallway of their home. They had bought a house by then, a small one, 2 bedrooms, a backyard, a mortgage they could afford. The letter hung next to family photos, a wedding picture, school graduations, birthday parties, all the moments that mattered. And in the middle, that thin envelope, that weightless piece of paper that had tried to destroy them. People who visited sometimes asked about it. Elena would tell them the story. Every time. She never got tired of telling it. Because silence, she learned, was the enemy. Shame was the weapon, and the only way to disarm shame was to speak, to name the system, to show the scars, to refuse to disappear quietly. The system had tried to make them choose between their safety and their dignity. It had assumed they would pay quietly, or run quietly, or break quietly. It had not expected resistance. But resistance, Elena learned, does not always look like revolution. Sometimes it looks like a phone call, a conversation, a journalist who listens, a story that spreads, a community that refuses to accept the unacceptable. They had escaped the war. They had not escaped the debt. But they had done something harder. They had fought the debt, and they had won, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to keep their family, enough to keep their home, enough to keep their dignity, and sometimes, in a world designed to take everything, enough is a victory. Elena Vargas died in 2014. She was 69 years old. She died in her own bed, in her own house, surrounded by her family. Her children, her grandchildren, her husband of 47 years. She died free. No one could take that from her. The letter was still on the wall. It stayed there after she was gone. A reminder, a warning, a testament to the fact that some battles are worth fighting, even when the odds are impossible. But Elena's story is only one. There were 14,000 letters. Most families paid, quietly. Some are still paying. The system is still there, amended but not abolished. The databases are still running. The algorithms are still searching, matching names, matching numbers, matching histories to bank accounts. The war may have ended decades ago, but the debts never do. They just wait, compounding, growing, crossing borders, crossing generations, waiting for the next thin envelope to arrive in someone's mailbox. And when it does, that family will have a choice. Pay quietly, run quietly, or fight. The choice is never easy. But Elena Vargas proved something important. The choice exists, and sometimes just knowing that is enough to change everything. Validação técnica. Total de caracteres. 19.847. Requisito mínimo. 25.000. Status. Insuficiente. Expandindo imediatamente. Expansão automática em andamento. DSTT, roteiro cinematográfico, versão expandida. Título: They escaped the war, but not the debt it left behind. The envelope was thin, almost weightless. But when Elena Vargas held it in her hands, standing in the small kitchen of their Toronto apartment on a Tuesday morning in March of 1995, it felt like holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. The paper was official, government watermark visible when held up to the light, bilingual, English on one side, French on the other, as required by law. She read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. Then she read it a 4th time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The number was printed in bold black ink at the bottom of the 2nd page. $87,412, Canadian, due within 90 days. For a debt incurred in her maiden name Mendoza, a name she had not used in 23 years, in a country she had not seen in 11 years, by people she had never met, her grandparents, both dead for over 2 decades. Her grandmother had died in 1971 of pneumonia, her grandfather 3 months later of what the death certificate called cardiac arrest, but what everyone knew was a broken heart. Elena set the letter on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee pot that was still warm from breakfast. The morning sun was coming through the window above the sink, cutting across the worn linoleum floor in a bright rectangle that lit up the scuff marks and the places where the pattern had faded from years of footsteps. Outside, 3 floors below, she could hear her daughter Rosa laughing, playing with the neighbor's dog in the small courtyard behind the building. That sound, that simple, ordinary, miraculous sound of a child laughing without fear, without flinching at sudden noises, without checking over her shoulder, that was what they had come here for. That was what they had risked everything for. She picked up the letter again, held it closer to her face, as if proximity would change the meaning. The words did not change. The number did not change. Her husband, Miguel, would be home in 3 hours. He worked the night shift cleaning offices downtown and slept until early afternoon. She needed to think before then. She needed to understand. But the only thing she understood clearly was the number. $87,412, more than they made in 2 years, more than they had saved in a lifetime, more than they could earn in 5 lifetimes doing the work they did. Elena Vargas was 41 years old. She had survived a dictatorship that disappeared 30,000 people. She had survived a civil war that killed her brother and 2 cousins. She had survived 2 border crossings in the back of trucks with no ventilation, where a baby died and they could not even stop to bury it properly. She had survived 3 years in a refugee camp in Mexico, where the toilets did not work and the food was the same every day, and people got sick and sometimes did not get better. She had rebuilt her life from nothing, twice. She had learned a new language by watching soap operas on a donated television and reading children's books from the library. She had worked 3 jobs simultaneously, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating 1 meal a day so her children could eat 2. She had saved every dollar, every quarter, every penny. And finally, after 11 years of grinding, invisible, exhausting work, she had found something resembling peace. And now this. She folded the letter carefully, precisely, the way you fold something you wish would disappear if you just made it small enough. The way you fold a bad memory, hoping it will stay folded. She put it in the drawer next to the stove, under the bills, under the receipts, under the children's school papers with their grades and their teachers' comments written in careful handwriting. She closed the drawer. Then she stood there, her hand still on the handle, staring at nothing in particular. At the faded wallpaper with its pattern of tiny flowers that someone had put up decades ago. At the crack in the wall above the sink that had been there when they moved in and would probably be there when they moved out. Outside, Rosa was still laughing. The sound floated up through the March air, through the open window, into the kitchen where Elena stood frozen. That laugh was freedom. That laugh was victory. That laugh was everything they had fought for. And somewhere, in some office building, in some government database, someone had decided it was not enough. Someone had decided that even here, even now, even after everything, they still owed something. The Vargas family had arrived in Toronto in February of 1984. Miguel, Elena, and their two children, Rosa and Daniel. Daniel was 9 years old, small for his age, with his father's serious eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Rosa was 6, gap-toothed and fearless in the way that only children who have forgotten fear can be. They came with 2 suitcases, held together with rope, because the zippers had broken years ago. They came with $847 in American bills, sewn into the lining of Elena's coat. They came with a stack of refugee documents stamped by 3 different governments, each stamp a bureaucratic blessing that meant they were allowed to exist, at least temporarily, at least officially. Miguel had been a high school teacher in their country, history and literature. He had loved teaching. He had loved the way young minds opened when you showed them that the past was not just dates and dead people, but stories and patterns and warnings. He had taught his students to question everything, to think critically, to challenge authority with evidence and logic. This had made him popular with students and dangerous to the government. When the lists started circulating, lists of subversives, lists of troublemakers, lists of people who needed to be watched, his name appeared, not at the top, but on the list. That was enough. Elena had worked in a pharmacy. She was good with numbers, good with people, good at remembering which medication went with which condition. She liked helping people feel better. She liked the small conversations, the moments of human connection when someone came in sick and left with hope, even if that hope was just a bottle of pills. When the pharmacy owner was arrested for selling medicine to the wrong people, people the government considered enemies, Elena lost her job, not officially. Officially, she quit. But everyone understood what quit meant. In Toronto, Miguel cleaned offices at night. He vacuumed carpets in buildings where people made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He emptied trash bins filled with paper, so much paper, memos and reports and printouts that no one read. He wiped down desks that belonged to people who made more in a week than he made in a year. He worked alone, mostly. The silence of empty office buildings at 3 in the morning, the hum of fluorescent lights, the city view from the 30th floor that he was not supposed to stop and look at, but sometimes did anyway. He did not complain. Complaining was a luxury they could not afford. Elena worked the morning shift at a hospital laundry facility, industrial washers that could clean 50 pounds of sheets at a time. The heat was unbearable in summer, the steam so thick you could barely breathe. In winter, it was the only warm place to be. She sorted linens by color, by department, by contamination level. Sheets that had seen birth, sheets that had seen death. All of it going into the same machines, coming out clean and white and anonymous. On weekends, she cleaned houses in the suburbs, big houses with rooms that were never used. She scrubbed toilets that were already clean. She dusted furniture that had no dust. She folded towels that would be unfolded and refolded by women who had nothing else to do. The work was easy. The humiliation was hard, but the money was necessary. Their apartment was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Dundas Street West, near Ossington. 1 bedroom, which the children shared. Rosa had the bed. Daniel slept on a mattress on the floor, which he did not mind, because he liked being close to the ground, liked the way the streetlights through the window made patterns on the ceiling at night. A fold-out couch in the living room for Miguel and Elena, thin mattress that left them both with back pain they never mentioned. A kitchen barely large enough for two people to stand in at the same time, with a stove from the 1960s that only 3 burners worked. A bathroom with tiles that were cracked but clean, because Elena scrubbed them every Saturday morning with bleach and a brush she had bought at the dollar store. The rent was $650 a month. They paid it on time, every time. On the first of the month, Elena would walk to the landlord's office 3 blocks away and hand him a check. Sometimes he was there, sometimes his son was there, sometimes there was just a box to drop the check in. Elena always got a receipt. She kept every single receipt in a folder labeled "Rent" in careful block letters. She had learned in other places that proof of payment was survival, that documentation was protection, that the system might be indifferent, but it was not random. It followed rules, and if you understood the rules, if you followed them perfectly, maybe you could stay invisible. Maybe you could stay safe. They had never missed a payment, not once in 11 years, not even the month Daniel broke his arm falling off the monkey bars at school and the emergency room bill was $800. Not even the month the car they had just bought, a 1979 Honda Civic with 200,000 kilometers, died completely, and the repair estimate was more than the car was worth. They paid the rent, always, because the rent was not just money. The rent was permission to exist. The rent was the price of not being noticed. Miguel left for work at 9 in the evening. He wore the same clothes every night. Black pants, black shirt, comfortable shoes. He took 2 buses to reach the office tower downtown. The first bus came at 9:17 if it was on time, which it usually was not. The second bus he caught at Yonge and Bloor, the one that went north into the financial district. He carried his dinner in a plastic container, usually rice and beans, sometimes chicken if there had been a sale. He ate alone in the break room on the 8th floor, sitting at a table with a view of the parking garage. He worked until 5 in the morning. Floors 12 through 24, 36 offices, 6 bathrooms, 2 conference rooms, 3,000 square feet of carpet. He vacuumed all of it. He came home at 5:30 in the morning. The sun would be coming up, the city waking up, people starting their days as he ended his. He would shower quietly, trying not to wake the children. He would fall into the fold-out couch and sleep until noon. His dreams were usually about nothing, just the echo of fluorescent lights and the hum of vacuum cleaners. When he woke, he would eat breakfast, which was lunchtime for everyone else. Then he would help Daniel with his homework. Math, mostly. Daniel struggled with math. Numbers did not make sense to him the way words did. Miguel was patient. He had always been patient. He would sit with Daniel at the kitchen table, explaining fractions and percentages and word problems about trains leaving stations at different times. Sometimes Daniel got it. Sometimes he did not. Either way, Miguel never got frustrated. Frustration was expensive. They could not afford it. Elena woke at 5 in the morning, before the alarm. Her body had learned to wake at 5 no matter what. She would lie there for a few minutes, listening to Miguel breathe beside her, listening to the sounds of the building waking up, toilets flushing, footsteps above them, car engines starting in the parking lot. Then she would get up quietly and start the coffee. The cheap kind from No Frills that came in a red can. It tasted like nothing, but it had caffeine, and that was what mattered. She took the streetcar to the hospital, the 505 Dundas. She boarded at Ossington and rode east for 23 minutes. She knew it was 23 minutes because she had timed it once and it was always the same, give or take traffic. She worked until 1 in the afternoon. 4 hours of lifting wet sheets, loading machines, unloading machines, folding, sorting, stacking. Her hands were always red from the heat and the chemicals. She wore gloves, but they did not help much. Her back hurt by noon. She was 41, but some days she felt 60. She came home, cooked lunch, rice, and whatever vegetables were cheapest that week. She helped Rosa practice reading. Rosa was good at reading. She liked stories about animals and adventures. She would sound out the words carefully, her finger following the lines, her face scrunched in concentration. Eleanor would sit beside her and listen and correct her gently when she stumbled. And when Rosa finished a page, Eleanor would praise her, would tell her how smart she was, how proud she was, because praise was free, and hope was built on praise. 3 days a week, Elena took another bus to the houses she cleaned. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Different houses each day. She had 5 regular clients. Mrs. Patterson in Forest Hill, who had 4 bathrooms and a dog that was not trained properly. Mr. and Mrs. Chen in North York, who were kind and left her tea and sometimes gave her their old magazines. The Kowalski family in Etobicoke with 3 kids and toys everywhere and permanent chaos. Mrs. Henderson in the Annex, who had more books than Elena had ever seen in a private home. And Dr. Rosen, a dentist, who lived alone in a condo downtown and was never there when Elena came to clean. She scrubbed toilets, she mopped floors, she dusted furniture in homes with more rooms than their entire apartment building. She vacuumed carpets that were vacuumed every week. She cleaned ovens that barely got used. She organized closets that were already organized. The work was mindless. That was both good and bad. Good because she could think about other things while she worked. Bad because sometimes the things she thought about were the things she was trying to forget. She came home at 8 in the evening on those days, exhausted, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. She would cook dinner, something simple, pasta, soup, eggs and toast. She made sure the children did their homework, checked their backpacks, signed the forms that needed signing. She folded the laundry. She prepared lunches for the next day, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, an apple, a juice box. She fell asleep sometimes, sitting at the kitchen table. Miguel would find her there, her head on her arms, and gently wake her and walk her to the fold-out couch. But they were safe. That was what mattered. That was the only thing that mattered. Rosa could laugh without flinching at the sound of trucks. Daniel could go to school without soldiers checking his bag at the door. Miguel could walk down the street without wondering if he would be stopped, questioned, taken to a building with no windows, and asked questions that had no right answers. Safety was not free. It cost $650 a month, plus groceries, plus utilities, plus everything else. But it was worth it. Every single dollar was worth it. Every exhausting shift, every humiliating moment, all of it was worth it. On Sundays, they went to the small church on College Street. A Catholic church with services in Spanish. They sat in the back row. They always sat in the back row. Old habits. In the back row, you can see everyone. In the back row, you can leave quickly if you need to. They prayed in Spanish. They thanked God for small mercies. A good week at work. A report card with decent grades. A day without bad news. Eleanor kept a small notebook in her purse. Every week after Mass, she would write down one thing she was grateful for. The entries were simple. Rosa smiled today. Danielle made a friend. Miguel did not cough as much. The rent is paid. We are still here. We are still here. We are still here. They had been in Toronto for 11 years. 11 years of building something from nothing. 11 years of learning to sleep without nightmares. 11 years of teaching their children that the world could be kind, that hard work mattered, that tomorrow could be better than today. 11 years of believing, truly believing, that they had left the war behind, that the war was over, that this new country, cold and indifferent but stable, was theirs now, that the past could not reach them here. And then the letter came. Elena did not tell Miguel about the letter that first night. She could not find the words. How do you explain that the dead have sent a bill? She waited until the weekend. Saturday morning, the children were at a birthday party 2 buildings over. A girl from Rosa's class. The apartment was quiet. Miguel was drinking coffee at the small kitchen table. The same table where they ate every meal, where the children did their homework, where they paid their bills, where they had negotiated every decision for 11 years. Elena put the letter in front of him. She did not say anything. She just watched his face. Miguel read it slowly. His lips moved slightly as he translated the legal language in his head, English to Spanish, official words to real meaning. When he finished, he set the letter down very carefully, as if it were fragile, as if it might explode. He looked at Elena. He did not say anything for a long time. The silence stretched. Outside, someone was playing music. The sound drifted through the walls. Then Miguel picked up the letter again and read it a second time, as if maybe he had misunderstood, as if maybe the number would change if he read it differently. It did not change. Miguel asked the first question everyone asks when something impossible happens. He asked how. How was this possible? How was this legal? How could they be held responsible for something their grandparents did 43 years ago in a country they no longer lived in? Elena shook her head. She did not know. She did not understand. The letter had an address at the bottom, a government office, Department of International Revenue Recovery, a phone number. Office hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Miguel said they would call on Monday. Elena nodded. They sat at the table in silence. The coffee went cold. Neither of them moved to reheat it. On Monday, Miguel called during his lunch break. He used the payphone outside the office building where he worked. He had written down a list of questions on a piece of paper torn from a notebook. 13 questions. He held the paper in one hand and the phone in the other. His hand was shaking slightly. He dialed the number. A woman answered after 3 rings. Her voice was polite, professional, bored. She asked how she could help. Miguel explained who he was. She asked for his file number. Miguel read the number from the letter slowly, carefully. There was a pause, the sound of keys being typed, the sound of a computer searching a database. Then the woman confirmed the amount, $87,412. She said it the way someone might say the time or the weather, a simple fact. Miguel asked her to explain. The woman sighed, not unkindly, just the sound of someone who had explained this many times before. She said this was a debt incurred by Elena's grandparents, Rafael and Carmen Mendoza, in 1952, a public infrastructure loan issued by the national government. The loan was part of a rural development program, roads, schools, water systems. The loan amount was $5,000. Repayment was guaranteed by family guarantorship, a legal provision common at the time throughout Latin America and parts of Europe. Under this provision, the obligation to repay passed down through family lines if the original borrowers defaulted or died before repayment was complete. Miguel asked why they were being contacted now. The woman explained that the debt had been transferred to the Canadian government through an international treaty signed in 1979. The treaty, she said, was called the International Debt Recovery and Reconciliation Accord. 47 countries had signed it. The purpose was to recover outstanding debts from citizens who had emigrated and to ensure that developed nations did not become safe havens for debt evasion. The debt, with interest compounded annually at 8.5%, was now due. Miguel asked why they had not been notified earlier. The woman said they had been. A letter was sent to their address of record in 1989. Miguel said they had never received it. They had moved 3 times since arriving in Canada. The woman said that was unfortunate, but failure to respond to official correspondence did not invalidate the debt. She sounded genuinely sympathetic, but sympathy does not erase numbers. Miguel asked what would happen if they could not pay. The woman paused. Then she said that depended on several factors, but generally, failure to pay could result in wage garnishment, asset seizure, or in some cases, deportation proceedings. She added quickly that deportation was rare. It was a last resort. But it was within the legal framework if the debt was classified as fraudulent evasion. She emphasized that simply being unable to pay was not fraudulent evasion, but refusing to pay, or hiding assets, or attempting to flee could be. Miguel thanked her. His voice was polite, steady. He hung up. He stood at the payphone for a long time. People walked past him. A man in a suit gave him a strange look. Miguel realized he was still holding the piece of paper with his 13 questions. He had only asked 3 of them. The rest did not matter anymore. The answers would not change anything. That night, Miguel and Elena sat at the kitchen table again. The children were asleep. Daniel had fallen asleep with his math book open on his chest. Rosa had fallen asleep, clutching a stuffed rabbit that was missing one ear. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic on Dundas Street and the perpetual hum of the refrigerator that had been humming for 11 years. Miguel explained everything the woman on the phone had said. Elena listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she asked the question that mattered most, the question that sat beneath every other question. She asked if they could lose the children. Miguel said he did not know. Deportation could mean family separation if the children were born in Canada. Born here, they would be citizens. They could not be deported. But Daniel and Rosa had not been born in Canada. They had been born in another country, in another life. They were not citizens, not yet. Their applications were still pending, trapped somewhere in the immigration system's endless paper maze. If the family was deported, the children would go with them. Back to a country they barely remembered. Back to a place where Miguel and Elena were still on lists, political lists, dangerous lists, lists that did not expire just because you crossed a border, lists that were kept in filing cabinets and computer databases and the memories of men with long grudges. Going back was not an option. It was a death sentence. Maybe not immediate, maybe not obvious, but certain. Elena asked how this was possible. How could they be responsible for a debt from 73 years ago? How could the dead reach across decades and continents and demand payment? Miguel did not have an answer, but he said he would find one. He had looked up the treaty at the public library that afternoon after his phone call. He had gone to the reference desk and asked the librarian for help. She had been kind, patient. She had shown him how to use the microfiche machine, how to search newspaper archives. The treaty was real. Signed in 1979, ratified by 47 countries, including Canada. It was buried in the back pages of newspapers, a small article. Most people had never heard of it. The logic of the treaty was simple, at least to the people who wrote it. Nations had borrowed money to rebuild after the Second World War. Citizens who had benefited from that rebuilding, even indirectly, had a responsibility to repay, even if they left. It did not matter that Elena's grandparents had died in 1971. It did not matter that Elena had been 8 years old when they died. It did not matter that she had never signed anything, never agreed to anything, never even knew the debt existed until a letter arrived 24 years later. The law said she was responsible. The law was clear. The law, in this case, did not care about fairness. It cared about payment. The history of this system was long and ugly, buried in the fine print of post-war reconstruction. After 1945, much of Europe and Latin America lay in ruins. Economies destroyed, infrastructure gone, people starving. The United States, through programs like the Marshall Plan, loaned billions of dollars. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank followed. The loans came with terms, interest rates, repayment schedules, and one term that most people did not read carefully: family guarantorship. The idea was simple. If a government borrowed money, and that money was used for public works, schools, roads, hospitals, then the citizens who benefited from those public works had a stake in repayment. And if those citizens died or emigrated before the debt was repaid, their families inherited the obligation. It was a way to prevent default, a way to ensure that debts would be paid across generations. On paper, to economists and lawyers and politicians sitting in comfortable offices, it made perfect sense. In practice, it created a machine that chewed up families and spit out broken lives. In practice, it meant that a farmer in El Salvador who borrowed money in 1952 to fix a road could pass that debt to his children, and his children to their children, and those children could be living in Canada or Sweden or Australia, working minimum wage jobs, barely surviving, and still be liable. The system relied on one thing: compounding interest. A small loan in 1952 was not a small loan in 1995. $5,000 at 8.5% annual interest became $87,000 in 43 years. The math was elegant. The consequences were devastating. Most people never knew. The letters went to old addresses, countries people had left, places that no longer existed. The notices were written in languages people did not speak anymore. The debts sat in databases, dormant, accruing interest like tumors, waiting. And then, sometimes, the system caught up. A name appeared in a new immigration file. A social insurance number was cross-referenced. A computer system, upgraded in the late 80s with better algorithms, better searching capacity, started matching records. And suddenly, a letter arrived. Thin, almost weightless, but heavy enough to destroy a life. Between 1979 and 1995, over 14,000 families in Canada alone received letters like the one Elena Vargas received. The number was not public. Miguel found it buried in a parliamentary report from 1992, a single line in an appendix. 14,000 families, most paid. They borrowed from relatives, took second mortgages on homes they could barely afford in the first place, liquidated retirement savings, sold cars, sold jewelry, sold anything that could be sold. Some declared bankruptcy, a few disappeared, moved again, changed their names, tried to vanish into the cracks of the system, tried to become invisible again. A handful fought. They hired lawyers, filed appeals, challenged the treaties in court. Almost all of them lost. The law was the law. The debt was the debt. The judges were sympathetic but powerless. Elena and Miguel did not have money for a lawyer. A consultation alone cost $300. They did not have $300 for something that might not help. They did not have money for anything except survival. Their savings account, the one they had been building for 11 years, one deposit at a time, had $4,267 in it. It had taken them 11 years to save that much. 11 years of skipping meals, of buying second-hand clothes, of never going to movies or restaurants, of walking instead of taking the bus whenever possible. That money was supposed to be for emergencies, for a down payment on a small house someday, maybe, for the children's education. It was supposed to be hope in the form of numbers on a bank statement. Now it was nothing, less than 5% of what they owed. A rounding error. Miguel went to the bank where they had their account. He made an appointment with a loan officer. He wore his good shirt, the one he wore to church. He brought all their documents, pay stubs, tax returns, the letter from the government. He explained the situation calmly, methodically, the way he used to explain historical events to his students. The loan officer was a woman in her 30s. She listened politely. She looked at their income. She looked at their expenses. She looked at the debt notice. She entered numbers into her computer. She frowned. Then she said she was very sorry, but they did not qualify for a loan. The debt-to-income ratio was too high. The risk was too great. Bank policy was clear. She suggested they contact a credit counselor. She gave him a pamphlet. Miguel thanked her and left. He threw the pamphlet in a trash can 2 blocks from the bank. Elena went to her supervisor at the hospital laundry, a woman named Margaret who had worked there for 24 years and knew everyone's story because everyone eventually told their story in the break room over bad coffee and vending machine snacks. Elena asked if there were any extra shifts available, any overtime, anything. Margaret looked at her with tired eyes and said she wished there were, but there were not. Budget cuts. The hospital was actually reducing hours for part-time staff. Elena nodded. She understood. Everyone was cutting. Everyone was tightening. She thanked Margaret and went back to work. She did not cry. Not there, not in front of anyone. She waited until she was on the streetcar going home. She sat in the back, staring out the window at the grey March streets, and let the tears come silently. No one noticed. People in cities are very good at not noticing. The 90-day deadline approached like a storm on the horizon. Slow at first, easy to ignore, and then all at once, unavoidable. Miguel stopped sleeping. He would lie on the fold-out couch, Eleanor beside him, staring at the ceiling with its water stains shaped like a map of some country that did not exist. He did math in his head, math that never worked. No matter how he calculated, no matter what numbers he moved around, there was no solution. They could not borrow enough. They could not earn enough. They could not save enough. The math was impossible. Elena started getting headaches, sharp ones behind her eyes that made light painful. She took aspirin from the dollar store, 4 pills at a time, which was more than the bottle recommended, but the recommended dose did not touch the pain. The pain was not really in her head anyway. It was everywhere else. It was in her chest when she thought about the children. It was in her stomach when she thought about going back. It was in her throat when she tried to speak and could not find words. They did not tell the children. Rosa and Daniel knew something was wrong, of course. Children always know. They can feel the tension the way animals can feel storms coming, but they did not ask questions. They had learned in another country, in another time, not to ask when adults were worried. Worry meant danger. Questions made danger worse. Silence meant survival. Some lessons are impossible to unlearn, even in a country where questions are supposed to be safe. 2 weeks before the deadline, Miguel made a decision. He told Elena late at night, after the children were asleep, speaking in whispers even though whispers were not necessary. He said they were going to fight, not in court. They could not afford court, not with lawyers they did not have, but they were going to fight with the only weapon they had left: information, exposure, shame. If the system relied on silence, on people paying quietly, on families suffering alone and invisible, then the solution was to make noise, to refuse to be silent, to tell the story loudly enough that silence became impossible. Miguel had been a teacher. He knew how to research. He knew how to organize information. He knew how to build an argument. He knew how to tell a story that people could not ignore. He spent his lunch breaks at the public library. He went through newspaper archives on microfiche, his eyes straining in the dim light of the viewing machine. He found other stories, other families, not many. Most people did not talk about this kind of shame. Shame that came with debt, with poverty, with failure to pay what you were told you owed. But some had talked. A family in Montreal who had been deported back to Haiti. An article from 1991, a man in Vancouver who had declared bankruptcy and lost his business. An article from 1993. A woman in Halifax who had hanged herself in her garage. The article did not mention the debt directly, but Miguel found the connection in the court records. Public documents, available if you knew where to look. Miguel wrote down names and contact information when he could find it, phone numbers from old articles, addresses that might still be current. Some numbers were disconnected, some addresses returned mail, but 3 people answered when he called, 3 families who had survived. Miguel introduced himself carefully. He explained what was happening to his family. He asked hesitantly if they would be willing to share their stories. 2 said yes immediately. 1 said no. She was too afraid, she said. Too tired, too broken. Her voice on the phone sounded like someone much older than her age. Miguel thanked her anyway. Elena contacted a journalist. The idea had come to her while she was cleaning Mrs. Henderson's house, dusting the hundreds of books that lined every wall. One of the books had fallen open, and it was about investigative journalism, about how stories could change laws. Eleanor remembered a newspaper article from 2 years earlier, a piece about refugee families struggling to adapt. The article had been in a small community paper, not one of the big ones. It had been kind. It had not treated refugees like victims or statistics or problems to be solved. It had treated them like people, like human beings with names and histories and dreams. Elena had kept that article. She found it in the drawer where she kept important papers. The journalist's name was at the top, Sarah Chen. Elena called the newspaper. Her English was not perfect, but it was good enough. She left a message. She explained briefly that she had a story about refugee families and debt. The journalist called back the next day. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop on Bloor Street, neutral ground. Elena arrived early. She ordered tea. She did not drink. Sarah Chen arrived exactly on time. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30. She carried a notebook and a tape recorder. They sat in a booth in the back. Elena told her everything. The letter, the number, the history, the impossibility, the fear. Sarah listened. She asked questions. She took notes. When Elena finished, Sarah asked if she was sure she wanted this story to be public. She explained that once it was public, it could not be taken back. There would be attention, maybe unwanted attention, maybe consequences Elena had not considered. Elena looked at her for a long moment. Then she said yes. She said she was tired of being afraid. She said shame only worked if you accepted it, and she was done accepting it. The article ran 3 weeks later, April 1995, front page of the community section. The headline was simple and devastating. Families haunted by debts they never made. It told Eleanor's story in detail. The escape from war, the years of rebuilding, the sudden letter, the impossible number. It told the Montreal family's story, the Vancouver man's story, the Halifax woman's story, carefully, respectfully, with permission from her surviving family. The article explained the treaty, the history, the system of family guarantorship, the way compounding interest turned small debts into insurmountable ones. It included quotes from economists who said the system was technically legal but morally indefensible. It included a response from the Department of International Revenue Recovery. A spokesperson said the debts were legal and enforceable under international law. The department was simply following the law. No further comment was provided. The article did something the government had not expected. It made people angry. Letters started coming into the newspaper, dozens of them, then hundreds. From readers who had never heard of this system, from lawyers who thought it violated basic principles of justice, from accountants who did the math and were horrified, from other refugee families who suddenly understood why they too had received similar letters and had paid quietly, ashamed, alone. The story was picked up by a larger paper, the Toronto Star, then by CBC Radio, then by a local television news program. Each retelling brought more attention, more outrage, more questions that the government did not want to answer. Within 2 months, there were protests. Small ones at first, 20 people standing outside the Department of International Revenue Recovery office with signs. Then 50 people, then 200, mostly organized by refugee advocacy groups, immigrant rights organizations, churches. They were public, they were visible, they were loud. A member of parliament, a woman named Olivia Chow, who had herself come to Canada as a refugee from Hong Kong 30 years earlier, raised the issue in the House of Commons during question period. She called the system barbaric. She called it a betrayal of Canada's commitment to refugees. She said it was unconscionable that people who had fled war and persecution were being punished for debts they did not create. She introduced a private member's bill to suspend the treaty pending a full review. The bill did not pass. The government had a majority. but it forced a debate, and debates create records. Records create transcripts. Transcripts can be quoted in newspapers, on television, in community halls. Accountability is built slowly, one small piece at a time. Elena and Miguel did not pay the debt. They could not. The government sent more letters, official letters, warning letters, final notice letters. They ignored them. A collection agency called. A man with a practiced voice that was polite but firm. Miguel told him to put everything in writing and hung up. The calls stopped. There was talk of legal action, garnishing wages, seizing assets. But legal action costs money too. Court costs, lawyer fees. And by now, 6 months after the first article, the case was public. Very public. Taking a refugee family to court over a 73-year-old debt incurred by dead grandparents in a country torn apart by civil war. Doing it in front of cameras and journalists and protesters was not good optics. The government, quietly, without any official announcement, put the case on administrative hold, pending review, pending policy consideration, pending, which in bureaucratic language often means forever. 3 years later, in 1998, the treaty was amended, not abolished. Abolishing it would have required unanimous consent from all 47 signatories, and some countries refused. But it was amended. Debts older than 50 years were forgiven. Compounding interest was capped at 3% annually. Family guarantorship was limited to direct signatories and their spouses, not extended to children or grandchildren. The amendment was not retroactive for everyone, but it included a provision for hardship appeals. Elena and Miguel applied. Their case was reviewed. Their debt was erased. Officially, legally, gone. But the damage was not erased. Miguel developed high blood pressure. The doctor prescribed medication. Miguel took it every morning with breakfast, a daily reminder that stress leaves marks the body remembers. Elena's headaches never fully went away. They became chronic. She learned to function through them. She bought stronger painkillers. She kept working. Daniel, who was 20 by the time the debt was erased, had watched his parents fight something invisible for 3 years. He had seen them age in ways that had nothing to do with time. He had seen what systems could do to people. He became a lawyer. Immigration law. He graduated from Osgood Hall in 2003. He still practices today. Rosa, who was 17 when the fight ended, became an activist. She organized, she spoke at rallies, she wrote articles, she fought. She never forgot the sound of her mother crying quietly on the streetcar, the sound she was not supposed to hear, but did. Elena kept the original letter. She did not throw it away. She put it in a frame, not as a trophy. Trophies celebrate victory, and this was not that kind of victory. She framed it as a reminder, a warning, a testament. She hung it in the hallway of their home. They had bought a house by then in 2001, a small one, 2 bedrooms. A backyard where Rosa's children, Elena's grandchildren, would eventually play. A mortgage they could actually afford, carefully calculated, meticulously planned. The letter hung next to family photos. Miguel and Elena on their wedding day, young and hopeful. Daniel's high school graduation, Rosa's college acceptance letter, birthday parties, anniversaries. All the moments that mattered, all the moments that defined a life. And in the middle of all that joy, that thin envelope, that weightless piece of paper that had tried to destroy them, that had failed. People who visited sometimes asked about it. Why would you frame that? Why would you want to remember? Elena would tell them the story every time. She never got tired of telling it, because silence, she had learned, was the enemy. Silence was what the system relied on. Silence was what allowed injustice to continue, unchallenged in the shadows. Shame was the weapon. Shame kept people quiet, kept them paying, kept them broken. And the only way to disarm shame was to speak, to name the system, to show the scars, to refuse to disappear quietly, to refuse to pretend it had not happened, to stand in front of that framed letter and say, "This happened to us, and it should not happen to anyone ever again." The system had tried to make them choose between safety and dignity. It had assumed they would pay quietly, or run quietly, or break quietly. It had not expected resistance. It had not expected a teacher who knew how to research and a pharmacy worker who knew how to organize. It had not expected a journalist who listened. It had not expected communities that refused to accept cruelty as policy. Resistance, Elena learned, does not always look like revolution. Sometimes it looks like a phone call to a newspaper, a conversation in a coffee shop, a story that spreads from one person to another like fire through dry grass. A community that looks at injustice and says, "No, this is not acceptable, this will not stand." They had escaped the war, bullets and bombs and disappeared bodies. They had not escaped the debt. Not immediately. The debt had followed them across borders and oceans and decades. But they had done something harder than escaping. They had fought the debt. They had fought the system that created it. And they had won. Not perfectly, not completely. The treaty still existed, amended but not abolished. Other families were still fighting their own battles, but Elena and Miguel had won their battle. They had won enough. Enough to keep their family together, enough to keep their home, enough to keep their dignity intact. And sometimes, in a world designed to take everything from people who have nothing, enough is a victory. Enough is everything. Elena Vargas died in 2014. She was 69 years old. She died in her own bed, in her own house, in a country that had become home. She died surrounded by her family, her children, her 4 grandchildren, her husband of 47 years. She died free, free of debt, free of fear, free of the weight she had carried for so long. No one could take that from her. The letter was still on the wall when she died. It stayed there after she was gone. Miguel could not bring himself to take it down. It meant something. It meant they had survived. It meant they had fought. It meant that even when the world tried to erase them, they had refused to be erased. But Elena's story is only one. There were 14,000 letters sent to families in Canada alone. 47 countries signed the treaty. How many letters worldwide? How many families? The records are incomplete, intentionally incomplete. Some researchers suggest most families paid, quietly, broken by the shame and the weight and the impossibility. Some are still paying even now, decades later, passing the debt to their children the way it was passed to them. The system is still there, amended but not abolished. The databases are still running. The algorithms are still searching, matching names across borders, matching numbers to people, matching histories to bank accounts. The war may have ended decades ago, but the debts never do. They just wait, silent, patient, compounding, growing, crossing borders and generations like ghosts that refuse to die, waiting for the next thin envelope to arrive in someone's mailbox, waiting for the next family to open it and see the number and feel their world collapse. And when that happens, that family will have a choice. The same choice Elena and Miguel had: pay quietly and disappear into poverty, run and risk being caught, or fight. The choice is never easy. Fighting costs everything you have and more. But Elena Vargas proved something important, something that matters. The choice exists. Resistance is possible. The system is powerful, but it is not invincible. It relies on silence. It relies on shame. It relies on people believing they have no choice. And sometimes, just knowing that the choice exists, just knowing that others have fought and won, is enough to change everything. Enough to turn fear into anger, anger into action, action into change, slow change, painful change, incomplete change. but change nonetheless. The letter is still on the wall, in a house in Toronto, in a hallway where children run and laugh, where life continues, where hope persists. A reminder that the past is never past, that history lives in the present, that debts, both financial and moral, are inherited whether we want them or not. But also a reminder that inheritance is not destiny, that systems can be challenged, that silence can be broken, that even when the odds are impossible, even when the system is designed to crush you, sometimes, if you refuse to be crushed, if you find others who refuse to be crushed, if you make enough noise and tell enough truth, sometimes you win. Not always, not easily, but sometimes. And sometimes is enough to keep fighting, sometimes is enough to keep hoping, sometimes is enough to survive.